Welcome back to the Visions of Life Author Artist series. With us today is Elizabeth DeSchryver, who wrote the short story Disappearing Act, and two artists, Katherine Grossfeld and Susan Hall. Both of them were featured in Living Artists. Beth, I'll start with you. What was the inspiration for Disappearing Act, and why did you use 3 images instead of 1 for the story?
When I was looking through all of the pictures that have been in Crowwood's publishing books, there were several that appealed to me, and I'm like, I realized they were all pictures of women disappearing or emerging from backgrounds. And I thought it would be really interesting to weave all of these things together. So I created a story about loss of identity and refinding identity. There was an article I read in the Smithsonian about women of Hispanic descent in the Southwest discovering through genetic testing that they were actually of a Sephardic Jewish descent. They discovered this because they were being tested for the BRCA gene that indicates a probability of breast cancer. And so when I saw these pictures, it just sort of meshed with that. That inspired me to create this character, Serafina.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your story?
In it, a woman of Hispanic descent is getting married. She's pregnant and hasn't told her family yet. And her friend, as half joke, half serious, gives her one of these genetic tests because she said, you should see what the kid's going to turn out to be like with combining your genes and your fiance's genes. And she does it and discovers that she is substantially of Sephardic Jewish descent. Her doctor advises her then to go get tested for breast cancer. It's a complete upturning of her sense of identity. The story opens with their doing the final fitting for her wedding dress, and her little sister being quite obnoxious, of course. And then the other main character being her best friend. A lot of different characters, very different perspectives, what it means to be who you are. I enjoyed mixing it up.
She also has a fiance that she doesn't want to tell him the truth right away.
She's not sure how anyone is going to respond to her information. Her fiance is also of Hispanic heritage. Their families both go back to the 1600s in the United States in the Southwest. As it turns out, quite a few of the Sephardic Jews from Spain did come over during the colonial period between the wide open spaces and lessened interaction and the focus being on the indigenous people. It was easier to hide.
Katherine, now I understand from your statement on the painting that it has something to do with people focusing so much on the wedding gown as opposed to the reality of marriage. It seems to jive with that story. What was your reaction to her story?
This was a Vera Wang kind of Barbie dress, and I thought that's what we want for our children. Our hopes and our dreams for ourselves sometimes get caught up in things. The wedding dress itself seems to kind of sometimes be such a huge focus of attention rather than the emphasis on the couple and the marriage. I thought it was very interesting that Serafina chooses to see that the dress might be a woman disappearing or a woman emerging. And that kind of narrative was great because I think with all art viewing, we all bring our own experiences, we all bring our own narrative to something that we see visually. And I welcome that. I think that's great. And I thought that that's what Serafina did. She looked at it and wondered about the empty dress. And I thought that that fit in very well with the other 2 pieces of art that were with the story. And I did see all of them as having to do with choosing women's roles and whether we are emerging or disappearing. And I thought that was a wonderful fit all the way around.
Susan, let's look at your painting in the story. You were talking about your paintings reflecting something nostalgic in the past, whereas Beth's story have the character relating it to hidden identity and the future. Were you surprised at the association?
I always think of my work as kind of a Rorschach test for the viewer. And the same thing Katherine says, the viewer brings their own history. For me, it completes the communication. But like I love at an opening or something, just hearing how people respond. That piece, it's called Gift, and she's actually holding a little box and she's guessing and anticipation and mystery of it. In the story, she saw it maybe cancer, maybe it's a prescription or something. I thought, wow, I didn't see that, but I could see how she could say that. And that was really interesting. One thing that I liked about Ivy, your project in general, was just having the writers pick a painting to put in the story. With my work, the reason that I use lace in the work is to create a limitation that makes it easier for me to get over. I have a lot of creative block. Each piece of lace takes paint differently, and it sets up a structure for me to work against. And I think with your project, if I was a writer, which I'm not at all, I would be drawn to that.
Well, if you belong to a writers group, they often have a prompt, and this is sort of like a prompt. My first book, I have a really hard time getting people to select a non-figurative image to write the story. For this book, I allowed them to select one of 3 categories. I was wondering if, Beth, you thought that it'd be just as easy to write about animals as opposed to a non-living thing.
Any image can stimulate ideas. Any image that appeals to you or invokes an emotional response in you, I think, can generate a story. One person in the anthology wrote a story involving a picture of garlic, but I would look at this story and my thoughts would go toward a boy lost in the woods, the internal journey from fear to absorption of beauty.
That painting made me think a little bit of snow, seeing the deer through the snow too. So, I mean, so lovely and delicate. And I just think that you can do a lot. You can go different mental directions with it. I thought it was interesting, Ivy, when I was thinking about the concept that you had put out there for your authors, was the reverse of the usual situation. The story is written and then you go to an illustrator and have them do something for it. And I thought that was unique.
Yeah, I was trying to bring the living artist out there into the reader circle, and it's pretty hard. So I figured one way to do it is to have somebody write about it, and then people would read about it and also see the picture next to it. Let's look at another one of Susan's. Susan, do you have something to say about this one?
For years, I've painted my fraternal twin sister or nieces. This is one of the first times I've painted someone who I'm not related to. I met this woman at a yoga retreat, and she was just about to graduate from college. And so this painting is about her entering the world, and it's called Threshold. She's on the verge of what's she going to do, where's she going to live. And it was an exciting time, but she was also kind of anxious about it. And I was kind of trying to capture that. And the birds are just movement and direction.
Now let's look at another one of Katherine's work.
This painting is called Whispered Promise. I painted this only about 6 or 8 weeks ago, as soon as the Forsythia started popping down here. The Forsythia blooming is the very beginning of the cycle saying, it's coming, it's going to get better. We're going to have flowers and leaves and warm weather. And so that's just where it came from. And this one is called After School Cookie Time. This is actually my grandmother's stand mixer that my mother, who's 86, still owns, and it works beautifully. I was at my mother's house visiting her one day and saw the mixer in her cupboard and borrowed it to paint. And it just brought back all kinds of memories of being a teenager and coming home and thinking, time to make cookies.
Katherine, how large is your Forsythia painting?
30 by, it's 40 inches tall. So it's a little under 3 by 4 feet. That for me that's as big as I go. I have a tiny studio and most of my work is very small.
Susan, how big do you work?
The deer is 48 by 43 is a standard size for me. It's what I can fit in the back of my car. I do smaller stuff too, but there's kind of no in between. It's like small or bigger, because it's kind of hard to, you can like do this or you can do this, but it's hard to do.
Thank you, Beth, Katherine, and Susan for sharing with us. You can go to
This was fun.
ProWoodsPublishing.com or Amazon to buy those books. Thank you very much. I'll see you next time.